Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Viking Park.
It's been a minute since I last touched an RTS game. My experience with Stalin vs. Martians might have subconsciously drawn me to other genres. But now I think is the perfect time to dive right back in. And I can't think of a better game than Paraworld. Dubbed so because it takes place on a parallel world or universe from our own where dinosaurs and various other prehistoric animals never went extinct. Various factions vie for control over this world, but are all threatened by the existence of an invading force from Earth Prime called the Seas. This is a fascinating cult classic that my script editing buddy Nate has been requesting I tackle for some time now. Sorry it took so long. Kept you waiting, huh? Before anything else, I need you all to go down the rabbit hole with me, because Paraworld has been driving me crazy with its different versions that are out there. For starters, the one found on most abandonware sites will be a cracked version of the 1.01 release. There also exists a version 1.05, which is the one most mods are currently based on. To run version 1.05, you will need a CD key. However, Paraworld is abandonware, so you're going to have to acquire that key on your own. Sorry. There are a couple mods out there, but the one I want to cover is Mirage. It's essentially a community-made expansion pack, but I'll get into the nitty-gritty details later. I also want you to keep in mind that these different versions are melding in my head. Some things I talk about might not apply to one patch or the other. At this point, I'm just glad to know today's date. This script is over 6,500 words at time of writing. It'll probably only get longer. For now, I want to talk about this game's real-world story, or more specifically, its development. Released September 15th, 2006, Paraworld was the product of publisher Sunflowers, the original makers of Anno, and German studio Spielwinkelungskombinat, or SEK for short. A fairly fancy sounding name until you remember that Germans like to smash words together to make new words. When translated literally, the name means Game E-Development Combine, or factory depending on who you ask. Oh Germany, why is your language so silly? According to an interview with lead designer Thomas Langhanke, SEK was founded in 1998 by Langhanke, Ingo Neumann, Carolyn Butt, and Karsten Orthenbrandt. I'm very sorry. The four apparently met working on Terror Tools, a virtual terrain generation software used extensively for military simulation and training, and also apparently gaming. As Langhanke states, he got to work with interesting partners like Warner Interactive and Microsoft, which makes me think that Microsoft Flight Sims post-96 might have some German ancestry. SEK's first project would be Diggles, the Myth of Fenris. It was a 2.5D side-scrolling strategy game where your society of dwarves digs to put Fenris back on his leash. From what I've seen, it's a neat little game, albeit niche. Terrible name too. Unfortunately for SEK, their publisher Enonix began undergoing financial troubles prior to Diggles' release, to the point that SEK wasn't getting paid by their publisher. I don't know any of the specifics beyond that. From my research, Enonix as a company was defunct as of January 2003. While development for Diggles marched on, the first prototypes of what would become Paraworld were made. According to Langhanke, this was a rough time for everyone involved. They were finishing Diggles, starting a new project, and had the aforementioned money troubles with their publisher. The prototypes impressed new publisher Sunflowers enough to greenlight the project, one that would take about 5 years to develop, effectively an eternity in the early 2000s. SEK didn't make the job any easier for themselves when they decided to code their own game engine. Though after having a few things cleared up by Mirage Mod maker Zidel, this might be a good thing. If you aren't technically minded, feel free to skip the next 10 to 15 seconds. Paraworld is actually very mod friendly. It's built upon a scripting language called USL that's akin to C# or Java. Ostensibly, someone could make an entirely new game in a different genre using the existing features of the language. Though I can imagine trying to take an RTS and molding it into an action RPG would take a lot of time. You may notice on the box that Deep Silver was involved. I think they had the distribution rights and did the marketing in the United States. Not entirely sure, and I don't even know where to begin to ask about that. From the outset, Paraworld was going to be a dinosaur strategy game, but SEK didn't want to make a strategy game only about animals. They needed to find a way to incorporate humans into this world. Nate says this was a mistake, and there's a part of me that is inclined to agree. So the devs took inspiration from the Lost World genre of fiction. Books like Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, The Land That Time Forgot by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Hell, Langhanke name drops Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World in an interview I'm sourcing most of this from. He also mentions a French comic Asterix, the Dinotopia illustrated books, and Stargate as other influences. Stargate makes sense in retrospect. Paraworld underwent a number of redesigns in the years prior to its release. Langhunky is even quoted saying, "Kommt yet, kommt redesign. When time comes, redesign comes." Or so Google Translate says. Based off the things I've seen, it seems like they had a hard time settling on a visual design. I can imagine that they had a number of technical hurdles to overcome when creating their own engine and proprietary scripting language. Apparently, there's an entire fleshed out timeline created by Langhunky and some friends that details the historical events of Paraworld. Sadly, the game only gives us a peek, but I for one would love to get my hands on that timeline. I want to know the weirdo history. Sadly, enthusiasm can only get you so far, it seems. Paraworld received mixed reviews from those that played it. This resulted in poor sales and the eventual closure of SEK by January 23, 2007. This German article that I've run through Google Translate is my only source, so I apologize if I get any of the details wrong. Langhunky is stated saying he wanted to sell 500,000 copies at 50 euros a pop. That would have been 25 million euros of revenue against a then record for Germany, 8 million euros spent on development. The article speculates that only around 100,000 copies were sold in total, 3 million euros short of breaking even. Heartbreaking. SEK decided to give their little community one last gift before going away forever. They released an update and a booster pack that included 2 playable heroes, 3 single-player missions, 4 multiplayer maps, 2 units, and a new building. Not to mention more neutral dinos, although some were unfinished. The last trace of SEK is this great little website giving thanks and saying goodbye. It also hosts this remarkably brilliant picture. I think it's my favorite part of the sinkhole I've ended up in. There's so much backstory to this game that I actually had to limit what I talked about. I mean, look at all these con photos with giant dinosaur statues. They deserve a whole paragraph to themselves instead of a footnote, but I need to actually talk about the game at some point. However, before moving on, I want to reiterate that it sucks that SEK couldn't make ends meet. Everything I've read and seen displayed a passionate group of people. I mean, you don't make these amazing credits by hating what you do. It's really a shame too, because a fair number of people involved in the game are no longer in the industry. Ultimately, I hope they're doing well and look fondly back on this game, because it is truly something else. Visually, Paraworld is about on par with other RTS games of the era. I really like how the game has a rotatable camera. It lets me inspect all angles of these wonderful dinosaur models and polygonal humans. The day-night cycles with dynamic shadows are impressive for the time, especially considering dynamic shadows threatened to set rigs on fire in those days. Each faction is wholly unique. Some of these designs are truly inspired. The architecture is great for making each faction distinct from one another. I like the wild variation of environments encountered. It actually looks like you're in different parts of this strange world. As I alluded to before, I think the animal models are amazing, but I'm incredibly biased toward any prehistoric creature. Which is why it's kind of astounding how some visual aspects like the character models have aged fairly poorly. I mean, just look at those hands. The intro video for the game doesn't play, instead resulting in a gray screen. I swear the main menu is the wrong aspect ratio and bits are cut off. The dynamic shadows and lighting sometimes go haywire for no reason. It's a strange juxtaposition of quality to have a person and a dino next to each other. Maybe some of this can be attributed to the version I'm playing, but I don't think that's the primary cause. I think aiming for realism caused a number of graphical problems and downgrades during development. As far as sound goes, it can be incredibly hit or miss. That's kind of a theme here. The voice acting is especially subject to some technical tomfoolery. Some of the audio lines can sound crunchy both in cutscene and in-game. Voice lines will be different qualities in the same cutscene.
There's a lot of ships out there. Too many. You won't be able to stop them all.
Then we better prepare the holy city for the attack.
There in the mountains lies Valhalla. At the end of Valhalla lies the Fountain of Providence. All who drink of it are released from their pain and suffering forever.
Pretty mystical. Is that the shortest way to the old temple, Heimlich?
The valley leads to a bridge, which in turn ends very close to the ruins.
The gruffest voice ever, Steve Blum, is credited as this character in the campaign. Except that's not true, because my ears hear Blum coming from the big bad evil guy's mouth. I also listened to Steve Kramer's voice, and I think he's actually Kleeman. I think whoever was in charge of the in-game credits made a mistake. A simple one, true, but it also caused me to go down a minor rabbit hole nearly 20 years later to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Some of the sound effects are not great. they can have that audible crunch like the voice lines. And the sound effect layering is a problem. Unit selection speeches will overlap and just create this cacophony of noise. It can lead to some fun things though, like how I can click spam the Dragon Clan Town Center. Still, my ears would prefer not to have to deal with it when giving individual units commands, especially in a game as micro-intensive as Paraworld. Somehow, the music is fantastic. It's mainly epic-sounding orchestral soundtrack that fits the visual themes well. The sheer volume of music is impressive too. There's a wide range of area-specific music, and each faction has multiple combat themes. I mean, listen to this. After doing some digging, I'm not as surprised. Dynamedion is a company that you might occasionally see toward the back of a game's credits. That's because they are band nerds who specialize in orchestral video game music. Way less important than some CEO in France who has only ever seen video games as a money-making machine while ignoring severe misconduct from those beneath him. Don't know who that could be though. In any case, the heads of Dynamedion have games like Alan Wake, Total War, Mortal Kombat, Tropico, and Hitman on their resumes, to name a few. So no shock, the music is quality stuff. Dynamedion does good work. In short, the music is god tier while the rest of the sound ranges from compressed to hell and alright. Could be worse. The gameplay is this weird mash of great and confusing ideas. Paraworld is built upon the template of Age of Empires. Your four currencies are food, wood, stone, and skulls. Food comes from farms, boats, bushes, and creatures. If you need me to explain where wood and rocks come from, I can't help you. Go outside. Skulls are, well, the skulls of your dead enemies. They're the currency used for leveling up units. Leveling up a unit increases its tier, size, and fully heals said unit. Managing your unit tiers is going to be necessary because there are only so many slots per tier. Oh, and you can only have a total of 52 units, including workers. Huh? A hard 52 unit limit is small for an RTS, especially from 2006. For context, Rise and Fall had unit limits in the hundreds to thousands. But the fewer available units ends up making Paraworld much more micro-intensive. This is the first of a myriad of design choices that seem like a mixture of working within limitations and deliberate decisions. The best way I can explain this is by breaking down the gameplay. I'm gonna go as general as possible because each of the 3 factions play very differently. Like any good RTS, you need to build an economy. So you have your workers build collection depots and acquire basic resources. Gather enough and click the button to advance the epoch. With each epoch comes new buildings and units. Buildings are typically the same across factions, so I won't delve too much into them. New units range from axemen to dinosaurs with machine guns. Depends on who you play. But each faction will have the same basic 3 infantry units: swordsmen, spearmen, and archers. Each faction is able to recruit one of these units as a tier 1 and a tier 3. Norse get warriors, Dust Riders get spears, and the Dragon Clan gets archers. Hovering over a unit will show their strengths and weaknesses against specific types of units, be they humanoid, creature, mechanical, or building. Combat can also occur on the high seas, but do beware naval units will take slots from your ground army. Titans are the super units of each faction and are different kinds of armored dinosaurs. They can essentially stop an attack by themselves. They may not win, but the enemy AI will waste all their time trying to kill these walking tanks. Possibly my favorite part of the game in retrospect. How can I not like a Brachiosaurus with a cannon and machine gun strapped to its back? Various heroes can be recruited from taverns. These heroes have special abilities and faction-specific unlocks with each successive tier. This is lost upon a hero's demise, so try to keep them alive. Heroes include the likes of Nikolai Taslov and James Warden. Yeah, I'm not sure why they made Diet Nikola Tesla and Charles Darwin Zero. They're historical figures, so I doubt anyone can claim the copyright of their likeness. I mean, there's a mission screen from the campaign that calls him both James and Charles. They knew what they were doing. I don't get it and probably never will. The Army Builder system is another unique mechanic of Paraworld. Before any mission or skirmish, you will have a set number of points to buy starting units and resources. I really like this because it opens up your early game possibilities. You can try to cheese with a rush, focus on bringing your economy online, and everything in between. You can even recruit heroes early. I think this is a fantastic mechanic, and I actually can't think of anything else that has used it before or since. Okay, now that you have an understanding, it's time to enter the realm of madness that is factions. Each faction plays radically different from one another. Normally, welcome in an RTS game, but here it's on a whole other level. Because balance seems to have taken an afterthought to aesthetics and theme. Let's start with the Dust Riders, a group of nomads who follow herds of creatures and are experts at taming them. This is most evident in the fact that they don't have a town center. Instead, these harvesting carts serve that function. They also happen to take up a level 1 unit slot. The harbors are giant turtles, so they also deserve a slot. Advancing epochs require skulls in addition to the usual resources. And unlike the other factions, the Dust Riders don't practice agriculture. They have to acquire all their food from neutral creatures on the map. Thankfully, animals will respawn at nests, but those nests can be destroyed. A Dust Rider will have to keep an eye on the local ecosystem. At least, that's what I thought until I unlocked a slaughterhouse in a skirmish match. Maybe I'm an idiot and missed it, but I don't remember building any slaughterhouses during the campaign. Buildings can be broken down and the resources mostly refunded. Walls look more like temporary measures than permanent solutions. Every aspect about this faction is centered on them being a nomadic tribe. And they're the worst faction in the game for it. The other factions outclass these guys for the simple fact that they have reliable sources of food. Food is always going to be scarce as a Dust Rider player, and your best creatures cost a lot of food. Not to mention that their economy and army are hampered by the existence of carts and living harbors. Worst of all, their monks don't heal, instead resurrecting units, which is a process that must be controlled manually by the player, unlike healing. On the exact opposite spectrum is the Dragon Clan. Inspired by East Asian cultures, they are by far the most advanced playable faction. They use gunpowder and have tanks. At least they've put their advantage to good use by becoming the pirate lords of Paraworld. The Dragon Clan is one of the best turtle factions I've ever seen. For starters, they do not need to build houses for their population. Instead, town centers will increase the population limit. There's even an upgrade so you don't have to build as many. On top of regular farming, the Dragon Clan engages in a panda prevention program with bamboo plantations. This creates a never-ending source of wood, meaning that stone is the only limited resource for the Dragon Clan. Even that isn't so limited, as trade carts between warehouses generate resources including stone. While most of this is unlocked over epochs, the traps are available from the start. Ranging from snares to dinosaur nests to fire pits, the clan is determined to keep others out. Wait, not that clan. especially considering that your buildings can be rigged to explode. These mechanics are what is supposed to make the Dragon Clan differentiated from other factions, but the sheer technological advantage of a mortar is really enough to squash any chance those dirty nomads had at getting over my walls. The Norse are the midway between these two factions. They have access to some level of technology as evidenced by agriculture and steampunk tanks, but they seem to have held on to their ancestral ways with berserkers, battle mammoths, and log throwers. Wood and food can be collected from the same resource building? I actually don't have a ton to say about this faction. Compared to the others, the Norse seem to have been made with balance in mind. Like, this was designed first and the rest were formulated around it kind of thing. One last non-playable faction exists in the campaign called the Society of Exact Alternative Science, or SEAS. This faction is the most recent addition to the world with their knowledge and use of the steam engine and robotics. They are complete and total bullshit and I hate them. You'll understand why in the spoiler section. There are multiple ways to play, from the campaign to skirmish to multiplayer. Campaign is sticking behind spoiler tags since I have too much to say about the story. I haven't played the multiplayer, so I won't comment on it. But I will say that the wide variety of skirmish maps is appreciated. The 3 different modes are also more than enough for me. All I need is some deathmatch to satiate my cravings. On top of my prior statements, I have a critique or two for the gameplay. The unit pathfinding is not great. I've seen worse, but also much better. Same with the unit AI. The unit area of aggression is weirdly large, and they will also chase down enemies to their deaths unless told to hold their ground. And you can also see neutral creatures in the fog of war, potentially allowing you to see supposedly hidden enemy movements. Paraworld is so weird yet entertaining despite my critiques. I believe I can officially classify Paraworld as a Eurojank RTS. It's one of those games where if you can look past the bad and not play the Dust Riders, there's an attention to detail unlike many other games of the era. The story is out there even for an RTS game. Never forget Universe at War with its weirdo aliens, future robots, and awakened Atlanteans. I've already explained the premise of the alternate world, but now is an important time to mention the peculiarities of this world. The 2 that stick out in my mind are that people do not age and electricity cannot exist by some paraphysics. The campaign starts with 3 scientists named Cole, Bella, and Stina lured to the alternate world by the promise of fantastical scientific discoveries. And more importantly, funding. Unknown to them, they will shape the fate of both worlds by the end of their journey. Up ahead is going to be spoilers for the whole campaign because there's a lot to go over here in terms of story and gameplay. So if you want to avoid Paraworld spoilers, go here. Okay, I first want to say how strange the intro is to me. The game starts with our trio meeting Big Bad Jarvis Babbitt in his clearly evil office. This cutscene is pretty great to watch back because of the background details. There are a bunch of miniaturized unit models in the background. Babbitt also has a portrait of himself holding a minigun. Cole, Bella, and Stina arrive in Paraworld via jump box from the back of a plane into the eye of a storm. There's all this talk about portals and planetary alignments. It's never entirely clear, so I'm just gonna do the best I can. From here, the tutorial begins. Welcome to Viking Park. I've always liked it when a game ties its tutorial into the campaign, like the Total War games since I think Rome 1 or Medieval 2. Mission loading screens usually help to contextualize what's happening. They provide insight into the inner thoughts of our main cast of heroes. Flesh them out a bit, if you will. Like how Cole isn't buying that this is some kind of off-brand Cretaceous kingdom. In the night, a stranger tells Ada that 3 more recruits are on the way and the existing ones must be disposed of. Ada has a change of heart, probably due to her and Cole's implied mutual affection. So instead, our heroes are put on a boat and shipwrecked, left to start a rebellion against the seas. The first couple of missions are finding your bearings and helping out the Norse peoples. They eventually tell the heroes to go south. There, they will meet a man who holds the key to their future. And his name is Larry. He's got a trade airship that he runs with his brothers, Barry and Harry. Only Barry got captured by some Amazons. Larry offers you a ride on the Parenberg if you rescue his brother Harry. You meet Mary Harry later, but he's not important. After saving Barry and getting acquainted with the Dust Riders, there's a scene where Babbitt orders a volcano to erupt like it's the Death Star. For fun, I guess? After saving some dinos, our intrepid trio learns of the Holy City and its High Council. They set off in search of some answers. Instead, they find the Holy City looking like Dresden. This is the first of a few missions where the army you start with is the one you'll have for the entire mission. So knowledge of the army builder comes in real handy right about now. What follows is an effort to stop the sacking of the Holy City by pirates, all while the guards lazily watch from their safe zone. The pirates are chased off, but the buccaneers get away with a number of slaves. Cole Belsana are tasked with getting them back. Meanwhile, in the original reality, Ada's in hot water over letting our heroes escape. She's put into protective custody by Babbitt. Must be hard on him since he and Ada look so happy in the portrait behind them. His little diatribe before Mission 6 gives you all the information you need. He compares his loss to what Lord Mountbatten must have felt when we lost India. For, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, historical context, Albert Victor Nicholas Louis Francis Mountbatten, 1st Earl Mountbatten of Burma, was the last Viceroy and Governor General of India under the British Empire and its transitional leader overseeing the partition of India and Pakistan. A decidedly controversial figure whose assassination by the IRA marked an escalation of the troubles in Northern Ireland. This guy is such a rabbit hole. I have somehow been directly affected by him. Mountbatten was involved in the creation of the International Baccalaureate program that my high school was a part of. That fact alone makes me kind of hate him more than anything else. Mission 6 may not be the hardest mission, but damn if it was not the longest one. Most of these missions are averaging between 45 minutes to an hour, which is pretty standard stuff for an RTS campaign. It took me over 2.5 hours to beat this godforsaken mission. And it's simply because it takes forever to gather food as the Dust Riders. I was at near max capacity for stone and wood the whole time, but always struggled with food. Like, I cannot get across how much they suck, despite being my favorite faction conceptually. Being a dino nomad sounds rad! When the mission mercifully ends, you take the ship back to the Holy City to talk to the Holy Governor. He recites prophecies where heroes would fall from the sky and save the world with a series of miracles. The first of such miracles is bringing water to the desert. Sounds nuts, but...
No, that is the prophecy.
The hero trio has an Indiana Jones-style chase scene with the desert natives before taking refuge in the home of good value Nikola Tesla. Taslov wasn't down with the enslavement of another planet for funsies, so he was banished by the seas. He agrees to help our heroes get home with his genius and already completed portal machine. After subduing the natives and raising the floodgates, the water is flowing in the desert once more. The seas are officially done with the chaos the three are causing, so they invade the island themselves. Their steam-powered hovercraft, spider tanks, and battlebots are impressive and overall difficult to deal with, but enough numbers can defeat any technology. While this is happening, the Governor meets with Babbitt, revealing that, as always, politicians are beholden to anyone but the people they represent. After a couple of good intimidation rolls and this silly smoke cloud mic drop by Babbitt, the Governor is convinced. He sends the three on a journey to Valhalla with our boy Heinrich Kleeman as a guide. Annoyingly, you can't let Kleeman die, else the mission will fail. Doubly so when after all the trials and undead tribulations, Kleeman betrays our triad. He then drinks from the Fountain of Unyouth. Discouth? Fuck it. He gets all ghouly gross and is a surprisingly tactical boss fight. Afterwards, a gate opens up into the lands of the Dragon Clan. Zzz. The bridge forward gets blown, but there is an aerial alternative in the form of a derelict plane. Who cares where it came from? This story is so batshit, I'm just glad I still know what a plane is at this point. The locals need their lunch money taken and all they have are plane parts. Then you actually have to build a ramp to launch the plane. A process that took me nearly 30 minutes with 5 workers. Oh, and you have to fend off the attacks from some Norse nerds all the while. It is unnecessarily tedious. I walked away for a few minutes and nothing went wrong. That is a big problem to have in a real-time strategy game. The ramp built, our heroes take to the skies straight into a plethora of pterodactyls. They walk away from the resulting plane crash unscathed in classic action movie style. An enemy scout runs to inform of their location, but Charles Darwin Zero arrives with his hungry pet Allosaurus. This mission is the first time you fight the siege proper, and it's rough. Even as the Dragon Clan, I struggle against the technological superiority of the seas and their battlebots. The mission ends with you destroying the base and capturing this douche Layton. He originally ordered our trio's demise. The three Parateers return victorious to the Holy City where the Governor is talking some mad shit to the High Council. His power threatened by their presence, he calls the Parateers false prophets and demands combat by trial. Finally, an excuse to use this Aztec-looking arena that can be seen off to the side of Mission 5. I think the arena fight is a great mission. The heroes are your only units, but they can be upgraded as normally through the skulls of their enemies. Plus, there are these convenient healing pools around the arena for when you can't level up anymore. If you're halfway decent at micro positioning, this should be no challenge. The mission ends with a duel between Cole and the governor where Cole comes out victorious. Lane escapes during the commotion, but he can't run forever. And neither can the three amigos because the Seeds have mobilized their entire fleet. This mission feels pointless. I spent 50 minutes killing boats only to be told there were too many boats to kill and to retreat. Annoying, but whatever. Not the worst RTS mission I've played. Mission 13 is where the difficulty begins to spike higher than Mount Olympus. Up until now, I have occasionally had a difficult time during some missions due to skill issues. There may have been a mission or two where I lowered the difficulty. Mostly the ones where I had to play the Dust Riders. But Mission 13 is where I think the difficulty actually becomes bullshit. You have 45 minutes to build your defenses until the Seas launch a full-out assault on the Holy City. Only, they will also be sending powerful units to attack you while you try and build up your defenses. If one of the city's walls breaks, it's over. To top off the impossibility of this mission, the AI is clearly cheating. They're able to spawn far more high-tier units than possible and seem to have near infinite resources. This is going to be the case for the rest of the game. You'll get allied units that come to your aid, but because of pathfinding and AI problems, they are no help whatsoever. Story-wise isn't much better. Gnarls Gordon and his Allosaurus are cut down by that douche Layton. Despite all this, I wasn't forced into the abyss. No, that came with Mission 14. The Prison Break is one of my least favorite missions I have played in an RTS. It is some straight up nonsense, with large groups of overpowered enemies attacking my tiny settlement with only 2 sources of rocks. I basically spent my first attempt running from one end of my base to the other to keep the Seas from destroying my meager defenses. After numerous failed attempts and much despair, I fell into the abyss. I cheated, but only to give myself effectively infinite resources. I was able to spawn units and do a whole bunch of other things, but I wanted to see what would happen if I didn't have to worry about the economy. It took me an hour and 18 minutes to complete the mission, with infinite resources. I had to build the Great Tower Wall to keep my base alive. At least the heroes are able to break Ada out of prison. Mission 15 might be the worst mission I've played in an RTS so far. You start with enemies attacking from both sides, are then constantly invaded by hovercraft on either end, and to top it off, there's either some kind of timer or trigger that'll activate a cutscene and an actual timer. Babbitt's Great Machine turns out to be just a giant rocket engine. The goal is moving the planet out of orbit so the portals don't work anymore. I don't know how any of this makes any sense, but sure, dude. I just know that I have to turn off these pumps. I tried to finish this level without cheats, thinking that there might be some hope of redemption for me. But when I saw the timer, I gave up for good. I am a dirty, filthy, cheating son of a bitch, and I am proud of it. Not even the delimbing and unaliving of Layton can make me feel anything. Mission 16 is somehow a complete cakewalk compared to the nonsense of the last 3 missions. Ignore that I played it on easy. I'd given up on looking cool. I just wanted this experience to be over with. The last limited army mission, but the army builder gives you more points than ever, so it makes the mission easy. Especially when you have a healer. The heroes must protect Taslov while he converts his portal machine to run on magma. The best way to do so is by destroying all of the unit-producing buildings on the map. Super easy, especially once you have taken control of the turret system. Babbitt isn't going down easy, so he pulls a Gurren Lagann, getting into his battlesuit, which he then uses to control a bigger robot. All the lights in heaven are his enemies. This final boss sequence is goofy mechanically, but I do like the visual design of the big bot. Very spiky and angular. Babbitt loses twice and finds himself dangling from a handrail. Despite everything, Cole and Ada try to save Babbitt, but Babbitt left Earth for a reason. He has a last philosophical speech before plunging into the volcano. That's not our only loss because Taslov elects to stay behind and keep the machine running while the others go through the portal. Rip to an OG. An undetermined amount of time later, Cole gets a panicked phone call from Bella. Turns out the fabric between worlds has weakened and dinosaurs are roaming around. Hell yeah, sign me up! I would probably get eaten, but it would be worth it. The game ends with a shot of London's skyline ablaze, mirroring the one from the intro in some kind of statement. Yet another game to end on a cliffhanger with no chance of a sequel. I just love it when media does this, instead of having a tight and concise story. Bastion doesn't need a sequel now, does it? And of course, I have to mention the credits. Because oh my god, these are the best credits I've ever seen. SEK are proud to show off all the technical foibles and absolute monstrosities they created during dev. Oh my god, they made a leather daddy with chaps. Of course they did, they're Germans! This goes on for the entire credits. These credits are why I cannot stay mad at this game. Paraworld was clearly a labor of love and a poster child for jank. The campaign may suck toward the end, but I'm not going to forget it anytime soon. If you aren't satisfied with what's in the base game, you can always try modding. There's a number of mods out there to do a range of things including cheats. Mirage is the one I decided to spend some time with. This is essentially a community-made expansion to the main game. It seems to have started in 2009 as the Seas expansion mod and has only gone from there. Mirage's feature list is enormous and covers the gambit. New factions like the Seas, mixed factions, aka making the Dust Riders playable, shitloads of multiplayer maps, enhanced match settings, and more changes than I have time to go over. I do want to note that the Seas are kind of a letdown when compared to their campaign brethren. I guess the creators actually believe in balance. Speaking of, I actually managed to get in contact with one of the mod creators, Zydel, to ask them a few inane questions. From our messages, they seemed like a pretty chill person. They were actually very helpful in regards to providing some background, technical info, and archival footage. Of course, the first of my questions was, why are they still playing Paraworld so many years later? In their words, I still think this is the most beautiful RTS game at the moment, citing the art design, sound design, and UI design as their reasoning. It's also very clear they do this for the love of it. In their words, I just like Paraworld and I have a good opportunity to make it even better. If I had a team, I would try to make a remake. I also found it really funny when I asked a campaign difficulty question and they correctly sussed out the fact that I don't play multiplayer. My scrubness is too noticeable, it seems. All in all, Paraworld is a classic example of Eurojank. There are a lot of questionable design decisions, but ultimately, if you can look past them, there's also a really fun RTS here. But I also understand if there are just some things you cannot overlook. I'll include a link to the Mirage Discord in the description. There you can find the mod and downloads for the proper game. Or you could just do what I did originally and go find it somewhere on the internet. Well, my thirst for jank has been satiated for now. Time to stop putting off a sequel video. Thanks for watching. Surf's up, dude.